Cryptids, mythica, fantasy, and sci-fi. We are everything monster.
Greetings, Monstrites, and if you're new to the channel and love monsters, subscribe today and become a Monstrite for life, no obligation. In this episode, I will be going over the most frightening of witches in movie history. Don't expect a usual top 10 type listing video, as there is a lot of ground to cover. Although if you prefer a kids voted upon list written by a typical YouTube video writer and presented by an uninterested host, then be my guest and send more views to WatchMojo. I'm sure they'll accept your soul as well. But if you're a fan of the strange and unusual, soul intact, then please stay a while and listen. First off, I do want to mention a disclaimer that there are no intentions here of offending actual practitioners of witchcraft or Wicca. The said parties probably understand better than most how demonized these beliefs have been and how the general public has been fooled into believing these nature-worshipping folk were and are devil worshippers. If you're still uneducated on this, then maybe that's just the video for another day. Now, having said that, movies such as the many I'll be speaking of tend to support this falsification, but that may also be the intrigue in this type of witch. For the ultimate scary witch, I was out on the hunt for your typical old Halloween hag. We can't deny that these fairy tale witches have cemented their place among monsters. I find that the warty skin and elongated chin and nose can appear quite disturbing in the right context, of course, as that appearance is just so unreal. So monstrous. And that was the challenge of it all, as witches are actually rarer in cinema than one would think. And to be a candidate for the concept I was looking for, the movie had better present a well-written script in order to pull this off, particularly if geared toward adults. Thanks to my patrons' votes, I was excited to make this video, as particularly the ambiguity behind witches can be very fear-provoking. Beyond the human-like appearance and cannibalistic urges, there are levels of unpredictability to these beings that may just blow a mental fuse and leave a victim to remain a vegetable for the rest of their existence. Unfortunately, there are not many films that fit the bill for me, but I've done my best to hunt the scariest of them for you. Now, let's get in the mood, shall we? The Autopsy of Jane Doe, 2016. The Autopsy of Jane Doe is a movie that most likely would get mentioned in the comments if I had not added it for a pretty good reason. The physical witch herself, or dead body of, is the least scary on my list, but the movie itself is certainly among the top few here in terms of being a fright fest, and therefore it definitely deserves a shout out. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 1937. Certainly not scary to most of us, but this witch fits the description. The animation and art in this first ever full-length animated film is just pleasant to watch, and to the innocent eyes of a child viewer, this witch could certainly leave an everlasting impression. I know, this is child's play, but in all honesty, even though this was disguised form, the Evil Queen is a classic. Pumpkinhead, 1988. Haggis, or Old Witch of the Woods, here is but a supporting character in Pumpkinhead, and hence she's earned a spot lower on our list. Nonetheless, she is part of a renowned horror with an excellent monster antagonist and certainly fits the bill of being a wise old crone with questionable intentions. That's putting it lightly. Sleepy Hollow, 1999. I was oh so barely convinced enough to add this one to the list. The witch appears young and dusty with a brief scene in the movie where her face transforms. Dark holes for eyes are an always delightfully disturbing image, but that's just about all she had going for her in terms of fright. The Wizard of Oz, 1939. Now it could easily be argued that the Wicked Witch of the West is less daunting than at least a couple of the previous hags, but I fully believe in the right context, again, particularly for younger viewers, this character is quite impactful. She's one of the few typical Halloween green sorceresses that have ever appeared on screen, and come to think of it, is largely the icon that has inspired and further fueled the holiday's evil witch. I wouldn't be surprised to find a comment or two below reminiscing on the mild childhood trauma of first seeing this wicked lady. Myself, upon viewing this classic in research, would have appreciated an older actress playing the part. I think that would have nicely added to the fear factor. The Pale Door, 2020. Another flick whose position here I'm somewhat unclear of. The witches are creepy crawly characters with not much to them other than having a blackened appearance and the desirable facial features for my application. All in all, the movie's sort of the From Dusk Till Dawn of witch movies with a smaller variety of minions and overall lesser budget. The Last Witch Hunter, 2015. If I were to make a video on the coolest movie witches, this monstrosity of a woman would undoubtedly be among the top. Considering this is an action horror, the dread is mild, but if one were to experience her in a more realistic, relatable situation, I'm sure this mistress would leave quite a scar on the mind and heart. The Witches, 1990. For a children's film, the practical effects and approach in the original The Witches is exceptional. The appearance is just what I was looking for, and to add to the eeriness, she is the leader of the coven, almighty in her ways and unpredictable, making her figure both respected and feared by her own kind. This was an excellent, very unexpected scene for those that knew nothing of the movie. And as a poisoned cherry on top, it features Rowan Atkinson. Suspiria 2018. Yes, Suspiria 2018. The original 1977 is by far a better and creepier movie, but I couldn't not compliment this ancient, stylish witch. Yes, with her sunglasses and mangled old naked body backed with some remaining arcane powers. She isn't only monstrous, but quite a creepy concept to fabricate. The Wretched 2019. With this one, we drift a ways away from the typical witch concept. The monster here is interesting in its lore, but in the end, she's more or less a zombie-ish immortal with all the spooky crudeness you'd expect. I wouldn't be surprised if you'd better envisioned her earlier on this list. Personally, I would probably place her somewhere before the Grand High Witch of the Witches. Don't Knock Twice, 2016. So-called Baba Yaga here plays more the part of a demonic entity. Brief exposes hint at something possibly deeper and more freakier, but all in all, she's just another creepy crawly in a modern jump scare filled horror. Hansel and Gretel, Witch Hunters, 2013. There are many witches in this film, including the headmaster, but for me, the first one encountered by young Hansel and Gretel really hit the spot. We have all the fairy tale stuff and a realistically frightening, aggressive persona to darkly blend it all together. Her face is a little too goblin-like, with the big ears to perfectly fit what I was looking for, but her violent behavior toward the children added to the gravity of the situation. Unfortunately, as with many of the aforementioned hags, she was made out to be too stupid and beastly, which for me took points away from the scale of fright. Makes sense for an action horror, but too bad. Legend, 1985. Meg Mucklebones from the amazing 80s film Legend. Don't yet call yourself a fantasy fan if you haven't seen this one. The practical effect design work behind Meg's creation is most admirable, to say the least. This monster is aesthetically totally pleasing to me in a monstrous way. The concept and the sculpted contrast and curves on the face, her many anatomical features and intimidating height, even though not your typical witch, all this produces for an awesome, scary being that, even though not too bright, sports an attitude not to be trifled with. I'd love to dedicate an in-depth video on her. Love that double take. Great acting. Hellboy, 2019. For what unfortunately turned out as a terrible movie, this representation of Baba Yaga is the best you will see on the big screen for most likely many years to come. From the impressive body contortions and acting, to the special effects throughout, to the fact that she is simply powerful, she is wise and malevolent, in charge of her domains. And sure, this isn't a horror flick, but that's what makes it even more special. For the uncanny atmosphere of the scene expresses well how frightening a confrontation with such a being would be. This Baba Yaga doesn't necessarily paint a picture of everything I was looking for. After all, she lacks the pointy nose and such, but she does showcase, well, that which is a bit unrulier in appearance compared to your average human, and an awareness and knowledge of the unknown far beyond which you may consider yourself knowing of. The Blair Witch Project, 2019. Similar in vein with the autopsy of Jane Doe, but different in that the witch doesn't make an appearance at all. I want to give an honorable mention to the Blair Witch Project. The marketing surrounding this low-budget film was smart, with the website only suggesting that this found footage film that inspired so many thereafter was indeed real. These days, you may find it corny or its final scare or creep out weak, but the vagueness of it all left so much to the imagination, and many times what is left to our own minds is much more terrifying than what a movie can fathom for us. It might be the old-timer in me, but I appreciated the approach, as if that had been a real situation in such a dreadful remote circumstance as this, and your co-survivor didn't immediately respond, that would instantly freak the hell out of you. And if this were to be one of today's repetitive horrors, then I'm sure the guy in the corner would just turn into some dark CGI monster rushing toward the camera into a jump scare ending. That's more pathetic to me. But to each their own. Speaking of depths of fright, recently on the live stream with our patron Monstrites, this was a topic we discussed, which I found rather enjoyable and fascinating, dissecting the difference between what is creepy and what is scary. Maybe someday I'll have to make a video, an official video on that. Exxon, 1922. I'd also like to take a moment during the honorable mentions to bring this old 20s silent film to your attention. This movie, albeit perhaps difficult to view for many of you due to its jumbled nature, has probably the greatest special effects work that I have seen anywhere close to this era in cinematography. It's certainly eerie and artsy, and for those major witch fans of you out there, particularly writers and movie producers and hobbyists, this is a must, at least to acknowledge and be mindful of. The Witch 2015. Finally, we surface at The Witch of 2015. This movie did it right, and by it, I don't necessarily mean the stereotypical physical witch things I was looking for. But this has much in terms of classic tales as well as history. It has brooms, poisoned apples, maybe not as plurals, and more, portrayed throughout the movie in a realistic, very unnerving fashion. I enjoy this movie so much so that I don't want to reveal images of her. And granted, she does not appear much in the film, but I must refrain to hold true to the effect of it all, the unknowingness of what the witch holds from us. This, a well-written, directed, and researched movie, deserves praise on this list just as much as The Witch Within, as one wouldn't be as great without the other. All in all, if you can't shake the curiosity, she isn't anything really monstrous or of a great work of special effects, but as far as being scary, she takes the pie. Apart from the actual list, one last film I wanted to share with you, as it is dear to me as far as horror movies flow. It isn't a witch movie, but it might leave you quite bewitched. One of my favorite of Stephen King's works, Carrie of 1976. I think if you are indeed a fan of today's topic, then this treachery-filled tale may just tickle your fancy. At the outro here soon, I'll present you with some other witch movies I found worth checking out, but first, I have to thank me patrons. Christian, Toby, Rain, Dante, Tammy, Ramin, Cloud, Joseph, Patrick, Grimmoozer, 2270, and to the rest of my supporters. In great gratitude, I thank you. And here are some other movies you may want to check out, some witchier than others. And who could forget The Craft? As prefaced, this was an interesting video to compose, which also has come to serve as a reminder that we need more witches in films with an uncomfortable level of depth to them. Maybe you will be the next to be part of such a creation. I'd love to read your thoughts below. Oh yes, and read your comments as well. And don't forget, for all things monster, stay tuned to World of Monsters. I have been and am Monster Master Arthur. See you again in another Movie Monsters episode, perhaps?